As soon as I saw this, as soon as I saw the name of this article, I'm like, don't even have to pre-read this. Don't, and I have not pre-read this. Don't even have to pre-read this. We're doing this article. We are covering this. Why can't conservatives be normal? Asks a complete clown of a conservative. The guy who wrote this, Peter Franklin, he is the editor of Unherd. Now, you might have heard of Unherd before. We've touched on some of their authors, shall we say, or people that have come from Unherd before. And you might wonder, well, what is Unherd? I hear you ask. Well, imagine conservative home, but it is like, well, for edgy conservative teens. I cannot make this up. I cannot make this up at all, because that is what it is, seriously is. It mixes, like, or at least tries to be, like, really serious in doing some of its articles, and we've got to cover, I think, Unheard sometimes. We've got it. I promise we will now. Um, but it does things like that while doing really stupid things like this. Like, why can't conservatives be normal for a change? And then proceed to probably spout off some really bizarre, unnormal stuff. I'm guessing. And if you've never heard of Unheard before, as I said, it's like, um, conservative home for edgy teens. Two of the articles right now on Unheard. One is Studio Ghibli, sorry, has sold the West a fantasy. Has anime become too narcissistic? And then the other one, the other one is in defense of weebs. That Japan lovers are nostalgic for a long lost pastoral Britain. And by the way, if you are on the Pony Club, we are doing the article because, quite frankly, it is just too good not to do. Because the idea that someone who is an anime lover myself is just really nostalgic for this pastoral Britain. Just what on earth? What on earth are people smoking on this website? Honestly, but we're going to go cover the editor and what he says here. Well, why can't conservatives just be normal for a change? He asks, he cries, asked a complete clown who would allow articles like that. While the thing is, simultaneously, those two articles are side by side by things like "This is why Hamas and not Hollywood villains," or "Hey, maybe we should, discuss something, quote, quite seriously about the ongoing nature of politics." Just as I said, Unheard. It's conservative home for edgy teens. But anyway, let's get into this, shall we? Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear. But yes, before we do, please do click the like, click the share button down below. There are links to the Patreon page, the Pony Club as well, the one-off station link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, and of course, as always, there is the YouTube thank you button as well. So let's crack on with this then, shall we? But oh boy, strap yourselves in. I think this is going to be a wild ride. So, of all the gestures that the BBC newsreader might make on air, the extended middle finger is among the least ideal. Nevertheless, that's what happened last week when Millie Morsham's mistimed studio prank went out live to the nation. Not the first time it's happened. Honestly, if you know anything about TV environments, especially live TV environments, that are very high pressure, um, very high strung environments. Not the first time this has happened. It's really not that big a deal. Yes, it looks a bit unprofessional, but to be honest, a lot probably goes on between, when the cameras aren't rolling, that helps these people, unwind and at least depressure in a quite, what can be quite a high strung environment. And unfortunately, sometimes that does spill over to the on air, but it's hardly, shall we say, the most exciting thing that happened. But of course, as you know, if you follow me on Threads or even on YouTube, you've seen me post about this. This basically epitomized the conservative civil war, with what happened next, which he talks about. So it was embarrassing, but at least it was an accident. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the CCHQ tweet on the same day. The feature that is still of Morini's faux pass, saying with the caption, Labour when you ask for their plans to tackle illegal migration. Some of our MPs were appalled, with one saying, this is beneath us, tweeted Alicia Cairns. However, Jonathan Gillis disagreed, saying, I approve of this message, he said. And oh boy, it went even further than that. It went even further than that, with Jonathan Gillis getting really quite vicious with, I think, Theresa May's former like minister of, like one of her like minister of comms. It got really vicious, like really vicious. How Jonathan Gillis got away with posting what he went on to post, yeah, I am surprised he has not been punished or censored for going on and doing what else he went on to say. Yeah. Nevertheless, it is actually still up on his Facebook page, I believe, so you can go see for yourself what he said. But I, to be honest, don't really want to repeat what he said because, yeah, it's I don't think that's even appropriate for an MP to tweet out, let alone in the way that he did. But anyway, we continue. So Peter continues. Well, I'm afraid I don't approve. And that's not because I'm liberal on immigration. It's plain to me the failure of successive prime ministers to regain control of our borders is the biggest reason, yes, it's the biggest reason why we're heading for electoral calamity. Say nothing of the failed promises in and around Brexit, ultimately to control our borders. It's not 13 years of austerity, a completely and absolutely bungled budget, which almost crashed the economy and almost destroyed the UK pensions industry, which we have said many, many times on here that if you think what happened now was bad, what is happening now is a complete walk in the park to what would have happened if these major UK pension providers would have gone bankrupt and collapsed. Because there is a lot of money that these UK pension providers put into a lot of areas of our economy. And if they had gone and called back in those debts, trust me, what we have now, complete walk in the park to what we could have had. So yes, I'm sure it's just immigration that's the biggest reason why people don't want to vote for you. Of course, let's not also talk about the COVID catastrophe that unraveled on the Conservatives' watch. Yeah, like I say, absolute clown. So, as for this current level of legal immigration, it's unsustainable. The product of failing institutions, flawed assumptions, and cheap sentiment. What? So, not only is illegal migration bad, but legal immigration as well also bad. And quote, unsustainable. Why is it unsustainable? We always talked about this. We've talked about this before. We've done an entire video on about this. You hear people talking about immigration and you listen to what they're saying. It's never immigration that's the problem. It is housing, it's benefits, it's lack of opportunity, it is austerity. You want to know right reason why the current asylum system and the immigration system is failing? It is because of years of underfunding and just not enough people. And this is your government, my friend, that's doing this. So anyway, fundamental and of course, pardon me, of course, difficult reform is required. But that is precisely why we need to communicate it with the utmost care and sensitivity. Yes, utmost care and sensitivity. Yes, because that is how I would describe most Conservative MPs trying to describe this. And yet, we have Conservative MPs trying to explain why it's a good idea to send really vulnerable people off to Rwanda. Yeah, care and sensitivity. Thy name, Conservative be. Again, absolute clown. We must never forget that we cannot throw open our borders. Migrants, including those arriving here legally, are human beings. I'm at least agree that he does say, you know, these people are human beings. So, you know, one point to Peter here. Although, to be honest, it's like, you know, saying that, I don't know, John Wayne Gacy was, you know, a good guy. Sure, he murdered all those people, but, you know, he was a clown. At least he made people laugh. Um, so, defeating the people smugglers will require a firm and effective action, but not at the cost of our own humanity. So, you want to defeat the people smugglers? You know how you do that? Really, really easily. Set up a safe route. Set up a safe route so that they don't have to rely on people smugglers. You could even try and set up a processing center over in France. There are a ton of ideas that the Conservatives could do, but they are just choosing not to because they really do not care and they like the fact that the system is broken because then it sort of makes a massive smokescreen for all their other problems that they have created. Oh, the benefit system, that's not our problem. We didn't break that. No, it's all those immigrants arriving here and claiming benefits while almost simultaneously stealing your job as well. It's Schrodinger's immigrant. Anyway, the quote finger tweet sent out by CCHQ last week compromises the moral seriousness with which conservative immigration policy ought to be advanced. If it were just an isolated example, it wouldn't matter much, but it is part of a wider pattern. It's not a wider pattern. That's just the Conservative Party when it comes to immigration. Again, the idea that they have treated this with like care and cautiousness that this subject requires is laughable. It is absolutely laughable. Why this is done. So continues. For instance, in 2012, when the then Home Secretary Theresa May declared that the government's intention to create a quote hostile environment for illegal immigrants, the most visible component of this strategy was to send out advertising vans to the targeted areas bearing the slogan, "Go home or face arrest." Even Nigel Farage described the stunt as, quote, nasty. By the way, this whole idea, the whole hostile environment, why not talk about one of the big problems that Theresa May, again, ultimately responsible for? The dismantling of the asylum system from, people to process these claims in the Home Office, to the courts being staffed properly, to be able to deal with these claims, to, actually funding the proper system, stuff that, she was in charge with. I think that is a far more bigger problem than her just creating the hostile environment. Once again, nice little smokescreen to distract from the real problems that Theresa May created when she was Home Secretary. So, this performative unpleasantness carries on to the present day. The examples include Downing Street's Immigration Week earlier this summer, which featured the Bibi Stockholm, a 3-story residential barge that was presented as a solution to the asylum seeker accommodation problem. Here's the thing. If the government were to go, look, we need extra areas to host people, and let's say we want to put them on a barge like the Bibi Stockholm, and it's going to be a temporary solution because we don't want to put them in hotels, etc., then actually that might be a somewhat good-ish temporary solution if it had been properly thought out, and the Bibi Stockholm was probably not about to look as if it was about to set on fire in the next 5 or 10 minutes, because honestly, that's what it looks like. The accommodation inn is far from desirable. It was full of Legionnaire's disease. Like I say, if you want to quote solve the solution of there isn't enough space to house people, then I am not ultimately against the idea of here's the Bibi Stockholm, but it's far better than than at least the Conservatives put forward, and it's going to be temporary accommodation. I don't really see that being a problem, but the problem is that it was done on the cheap. It was done on the quick and easy thinking. Oh, we'll do this Bibi Stockholm. This will be a solution. Again, wasn't the solution it turned out to be, because when even they are trying to present possible solutions, they can't help but be an absolute cluster. Yeah. So anyway, so the 3-story barge was of course presented as a solution to the asylum seeker accommodation problem. It is not much of a solution at all, but the forbidding appearance of the vessel was clearly meant to create a symbolic draconian crackdown. This was the same sort of gesture politics that was on display when the mural featuring the Disney cartoon characters were painted over at a children's asylum centre in Kent, reportedly on the orders of the then immigration minister, Robert Jerrick. Again, if you want, if you want to go, okay, we're running out of, hotel room, so we're going to set up, temporary accommodation. Well, you can either build proper accommodation. But if you remember, the big conversation about this prior to this was, Conservative MPs were basically going, oh, not in my constituency. Thank you very much. To which then they went, well, okay, we'll use a barge. And that's why it ended up being a barge, because no Conservative MP wanted this built in their constituency. Like I say, if you want to solve this problem of accommodation, then you've got to have the rooms available. And like I say, I'm not opposed to the idea of something like the Bibi Stockholm in principle, because of course what it's providing accommodation. They need that when asylum seekers first arrive. That's what they need. They need good accommodation. Keyword here being good accommodation. The Bibi Stockholm turned out to be absolutely awful, and is still proving to be absolutely awful, as well as we've just apparently heard recently. Someone committed suicide on there. Like I say, these people are the most vulnerable people in the world, and they are not receiving the help and support that they need. And ultimately, that's what they need. And if you want to do that, then you have to fund the system. And this is what is the real problem. All of this so far, this guy talking about, oh well, we're just gonna be nice. We're just gonna be, calm, getting across a calm, sensible, cool idea. I'm sorry, but that's not how conservatives come across when they are talking about immigration, and not just illegal immigration. It's immigration, full stop. So he continues, even the government's flagship immigration policy, i.e., sending a very small number of asylum seekers to Rwanda, is more about creating an impression rather than real change. Holy moly, at least we agree on that. It is. It's just creating an impression. In fact, it's not even creating an impression. It's an idea that's probably not even going to work, especially since it's going to get absolutely argued to heck and back in committee in a couple of months' time. Again, it's not the supposed substance of the policy that I object to. I know I object to that idea as a policy. It's an absolutely terrible policy. I have no problem with offshore processing of asylum claims. Again, offshore processing, not in itself a bad idea, but why are we sending them all the way over to Rwanda to be processed? that is the part that doesn't make sense. However, to state the credibility of the British government on the cooperation of a third world strongman strikes me as a bizarre arrangement. Then again, the weirdness may be the point. We have become a party for whom the grotesque is just the primary mode of communication. Holy moly. At least he admits that. At least he admits that. Because I agree on a whole 100% on that. Just to restate, I'm not talking about policy or principle here, but the preludation of the odd and off-putting in presentation. So does this guy not then think that maybe the policy and the principles being advanced are actually, odd and off-putting? just a thought. Again, this guy is an absolute clown. But it is a bad habit that goes back a long way. For instance, all the readers may recall the frankly bonkers conference speeches from the pre-1997 era. The classics of the genre include Peter Lilly's toe-curling persistence of Gilbert and Sullivan's Little List song and the bombastic absurdity of Michael Portillo's SAS speech. Again, they are not immune to this. But doesn't he think that maybe why those speeches were presented in such a way, not even pre-1997, but even after 1997, has been because they know that they are trying to pass policy and advanced principles, which altogether are just odd and off-putting. The Rwanda policy doesn't really come across as a good policy, and yet, but it's just off-putting in the presentation. No, the Rwanda policy is just bad policy from the get-go. So anyway, the rise of the modernizers after 1997, including Portillo's Damascus conversion, was the reaction against the wilderness of the past. And sadly, though, it wasn't a clean break. We still fought a 2005 election under the slogan, "Are you thinking what we're thinking?" which was almost self-parodic in its sinister implications. It wasn't until David Cameron, the first PR man prime minister, that the conservative Gothic was finally decisively rejected. But even then, there were lapses. And oh boy, were the lapses. And bear in mind, this is where your party is sliding back to now. Your party has backslid so far back into that political wilderness, you ain't seen anything yet. Wait until after the next general election, because oh boy, oh, oh boy, are you going to see some bizarre stuff and off-putting stuff now. If you think what's coming out now of the Conservative Party is now odd and off-putting, wait until after the next general election. But even after, of course, there were lapses, for instance, the leg-splaying horror of the Tory power stance. This is the posture that supposedly helps one project authority. Of course, if you've ever seen Blackadder the Third, and of course, where he gets the actors in, the power stance. Yeah, there were a lot of comparisons to that back then. Perhaps it does not in upper body shot, but the full-length photograph looks unfreakishly unnatural. And of course, when the Modernizer project collapsed in the fires of Brexit, the all pent-up weirdness of the Conservative Party were released. There is no point going over the chaotic events of May, Johnson, and the Truss years. The pandemonium is scarcely off the public memory. Well, it's funny that you don't actually want to talk about those and why, because part of those reason and those three people are part of the reason why you are headed to electoral oblivion, as you said in the beginning of your piece. Maybe you should think about those people and why those people, maybe their actions have something to contribute to that. And of course, Rishi Sunak's reign represents the come down from the psychedelic trip. Really? You think Rishi Sunak's reign represents like a come down off this LSD psychedelic trip that the Conservative Party has been on over the past couple of years? Oh no, the psychodrama continues, my friend. We saw it yesterday on the vote, the pre-vote of the Rwanda deal. We're going to see it after Christmas. It is by no means over. It is by no means over. That's for sure. But even now, this grotesque keeps creeping back in. I've seen Sunak on the campaign trail. He's a natural. That's the first time I've heard him as a natural on that, both in delivering stump speeches and pressing the flesh. However, his comms people have ruined him. It's not Rishi Sunak, it's just his comms people. That's why Rishi Sunak is coming across as completely unrecognizable to the common people, when even Rishi Sunak does not know how to use a chip and pin or put petrol in a car. Yes, that's completely relatable to the common man, isn't it? Oh yeah, it's just his comms people have ruined. Oh my word. His leadership campaign videos were distilled cringe, and I keep on telling you, Unherd, it's edgy conservative home, and you can see it in the writing here. Were just distilled cringe, and as Prime Minister, his pieces to camera are delivered as if addressing an audience of 4-year-olds. The effect is irritating and after a while unnerving. No, that's not just the addresses. That is Rishi Sunak. That is how he comes across. Everyone who has seen Rishi Sunak in the flesh, seen him speak, seen all these different quote speeches that he's done, that is how he comes across. That is Rishi Sunak. And I think he's desperately trying to defend the indefensible. It's not Sunak that's the problem. It's just his PR team. If he changes PR team, he'll be fine, people. Anyway, the worrying thing is I've only just scratched the surface of the Conservative strangeness. Really? You've only just scratched the surface? You've got a long way to go. Yeah, if you think this is the surface, because I've got some worrying news for you. You've barely even touched the surface. You've barely even got into physical contact with the surface. What you are seeing and what you are described is merely just the smell from the conservative barrel of bad idea and weirdness that has been festering for a long, long time now. You're barely even close to touching the barrel, let alone putting your arm in and touching the bottom, because you've got a long way to go yet before you even get to the bottom of that barrel. For instance, I could have mentioned Liz Truss's pork market speech, or Theresa May's dancing queen, or Jacob Rees-Mogg's recumbent, or Penny Mordaunt's raised finger, the index or not middle, or even Gavin Williamson's tarantula, or Matt Hancock. Which, to be fair, Matt Hancock is just his own barrel of weirdness, to be honest. I'll agree with you on that. But what it all comes down to is this. Why can't we just be normal for a change? This is normal for your party, my friend. That is your Conservative Party. Are you only just realizing this now? That, oh, actually, we look really bad. And, you know, it's not our policies or principles. It's just the perception that's wrong. Maybe if we can... No, 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 no. That's your Conservative Party. That's its policies. That's its principles. It is trying to put forward. You are failing. This is your party. I'm sorry if you're just starting to realize this notion that that's what your party looks like, but that's the truth. Maybe you'll unpack. Maybe just like Will Atkinson, who's going through his Brexit midlife crisis, or his conservative midlife crisis, shall we say, as well. When he had his first proper interaction with, actual conservative voters, and came off really unnerved, which was, again, hilarious. Because, again, that is your Conservative Party. That is the party you are a part of. It's not that it can't be normal for a change. That's just your Conservative Party. I don't even know if we have to bother continue on, because I think that just sums it. Yeah, honestly, I'm not even going to bother reading the rest, because that just sums up what an absolute clown Peter Franklin is in trying to put forward this idea. I'm sorry, but when you were saying, oh, look at all these problems, look at all these things that they've said, oh, it's so cringy, why are we so cringy? That there comes a point where you have to realize, sorry, it's not you who's finding it cringy, it's your party that is the cringe, that is radiating this odd and weirdness. It's not a perception problem. It's not a fact that you are miscommunicating these ideals or principles. That's just your party, I'm afraid. that's just your party, I'm afraid. That is how it goes. That is how it goes. That is what it is. I'm sorry, Beta, that you are finding this out now, seemingly for the first time ever. He probably won't care, but I hope he's okay. But that is your party, I'm afraid. And if you are, of course, is insinuating that there's going to be a big backslide, I think there's going to be a massive backslide, especially after the next election. Oh boy, if you think that what you've seen now, the stuff that you've mentioned, bear in mind, he is right. There is a ton of different weirdness he could mention. He didn't even mention Michael Gove, the videos that we've seen Michael Gove dancing in the nightclubs of Aberdeen. There's so much weirdness that comes across, and then to try and put this across, there's yeah, these people just being weird. They're trying to be hip and cool, but what are they actually really pushing? They're pushing at the moment the Rwanda policy, a policy that will only really affect 1% of all asylum applications, just 1%. and it's 200 people that if you spent that money here and you put it into the asylum system so that you could, process people's claims. Because under the last Labour government, we could do this within 6 months. It now takes more than a year, sometimes even longer, for asylum applications. And that is because they have defunded the system on purpose to break it. The massive backlog that we've got is because of the austerity, because of the defunding of the Home Office, because of the defunding of the systems that asylum seekers need when they get here. We would not have to have Bibi Stockholm if we had built these places before, or we had, enough accommodation, maybe enough social housing that the Conservatives should have been building over the past 13 years, but have just not built. Maybe people wouldn't be complaining about, lack of opportunity and immigrants stealing their job if they had, actually maybe fulfilled the Northern Powerhouse plan, or maybe even actually given a crap about leveling up. So many of these problems, he is trying to be, honestly, a real smoke and mirror defense of the Conservative Party, putting forward very, very bad policies and then saying, just a matter of perception. It's just, don't worry about it. They're just not selling the policy right. Take it from someone who works in marketing. If you've got a bad product, it doesn't matter how much marketing spin you put on it. If it's a bad product and people say it's a bad product, people ain't going to buy it. That's what's happening now. And you trying to pretend that, oh, if only the Conservative Party could just be normal for a change. Nope. I'm sorry. You come across as an absolute clown, being unable to really identify the true problems that everyone else can see about the Conservative Party because you're trying to defend them, I think, very, very much from an ideological perspective. I mean, you make that entirely clear. I think, to be honest, if you ask this guy the question, do you think the Rwanda plan would work? He'd be ultimately saying, yes, it would work. I generally think he would if you were to ask this guy a serious question about the Rwanda plan. That's because, again, why can't the Conservatives be normal? Asks a complete clown. That's really the answer he should be asking. He should be really asking that if he has these values and norms of, we should be, quote, sensible and understand that though these people are real human beings, then why is it time and time again Conservatives who act in the most inhumane way against these people? Why is it always them who are spreading, you know, complete, utter tosh and nonsense, like Suella Braverman, who got challenged on it? I think it was on a BBC interview recently. What about Priti Patel when she was Home Secretary? And even more, what about Nigel Farage? Because it's not like Nigel Farage hasn't had his own share of, very dehumanizing comments he's said in the past about, asylum seekers or even immigrants as in general. This guy does not want to get to the root of the problem. He does not want to get to the root of the problem that there is, honestly, probably the reason why these people are so dehumanizing and disingenuous is because they know the reality of the problems. They know that if they actually let people talk about these problems, they'd realize, oh, well, actually, it is a housing problem. We're in a housing crisis. I'd say more we're in a housing disaster, but that's a story for another time. And that's why, they don't want to talk about that because they would much rather say immigrants. That's why. Here's the thing: it wasn't that too long ago. The EU was the source of all these problems. And I'm sure had we remained in the EU, this guy would be writing the very same thing, saying, EU, because we're in the EU. Oh, if only we weren't in the EU, it'd be all these. Again, no, he's written them as probably the biggest smoke and mirrors piece I can ever see for trying to defend the Conservative Party. Just saying, oh, it's just a just a problem of pitching. It's just a pitch problem. If we pitch this better, if we stop being weird and odd about our policies and ideology, maybe we'd come across better. No, 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 no. It's this all stems from your ideas, your policies, and your fundamentalism that is root and core currently in the Conservative Party. And unless you can really address those serious problems, then the Conservatives will just never be normal. So there you go. So, as always, thank you very much, of course, for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.